Hey there, today we're going to set up a quick design system inside of Sketch. So I'm going to start with just a new document. Resize my window here for us. There we go. That's a little bit better. So for my design system, I really want to just capture a few different elements so you can get a sense for how they feel. I'm going to start by just making an artboard with A on my keyboard. And I'm going to go to responsive web and desktop HD as my option. And this just drops in a nice 1440 by 1024, about a laptop size screen on my canvas. Now, I'm going to imagine that you have a lot of thought and effort put into what you want in a design system. But I'm going to be doing a little bit more basic here. So I'm going to just pick a font like Roboto. And Roboto is kind of a Google default font, and I'm going to set up a few sizes of it. So I'm going to say that I want something big for headlines, so maybe something like a 48 point, and my headlines will be bold. So, headlines, heel lines, headlines, there we go. Then I'm going to set up a second style. This is going to be a little less tracked out. The first one was negative 1.26. Why don't I change that to 1.25? The next one will just be maybe negative 0.75. And we're going to make it much smaller over here. What do we do? A bold oblique, which is essentially oblique is just saying that these characters are slanted rather than given a proper italicized version, which would be a whole different version of each of the characters of the font. Subheadline. So maybe I want a little bit more differentiation there. Maybe I'll just go ahead and make it regular. And I'll take the color down a little bit. And then finally, I'll set a body style. Let me show you this website I love. A friend of mine turned me onto it. It's called Jeffsome, which is placeholder text from Jeff Goldblum quotes, which is very fun. Probably not for a super professional environment, but what I do like about it more than lorem ipsum is it at least contains a bunch of English words. So if you're looking to see if you're designing in English, this is a good way of getting a sense of it. I'm going to just limit the width here to 25% of the canvas, and we can say, yeah, it's much too large. So we're going to take it down to 14. We're going to space out paragraphs a little bit. 14 there, and we're not going to kern it at all. And maybe I'll bring back some of the darkness. And this will be my body copy. So I've got 3 styles of text. Let's create some text styles in Sketch. So I'm going to pick my headline, and I'm going to do new text style. And let me show you a little tip that I like to use here. I'm going to put 01 period in front of headline. And I'm going to just continue to do this. 02 subhead. Now, before you start giving these things numbers, you might want to adjust the numbers in post. And I'll show you how to do that. We'll say body style here without any sort of number. So you can see whenever we have a new piece of text that we're typing, in appearance, deselect it, in appearance, see what the numbers do is they put things in a nice order for us. So subheadline, headline, very quick, and they're kind of in an order that makes sense to me. Now, if you had 100 of these styles, you probably don't want to put numbers on them. You probably want to do different organization. But if you forgot a number, we can just go to Organize Text Styles. And I'll double click over here. And I'll put 03. So again, the numbers are just a little trick that I like to use, but it helps me remember where in order they are. And it's really great too if you have a design system with a lot of sizes that are similar to each other. Because if you have a lot of sizes that are similar to each other, of knowing for sure that they are two different sizes. So, we've got our textiles established. Now, why don't we move on to a few colors? Now, there's a lot of ways of doing colors, but I just want to do a couple right now. So I'm going to take some rectangles and just fill them. Just fill them. So why don't we pick 3 colors that we really, really like? Why don't we do something like a nice sort of mint? And then we'll get kind of like a cornflowery or sunflowery yellow. And how about a nice pastel blue? So a very pastel palette that we're working with here. I'm going to likewise make fill styles from these. So new layer style, I'm going to say fill green. I'll say fill yellow and fill blue. I should have write PHIL just as a kind of a gag. Now, this is really important too, because Sketch makes your document presets in a library available whenever a library is attached to a new document. So that might be a little complicated. It basically pans out to, if you have a color, add it to your document colors too. And I'm going to just take this yellow. You can see the palette stays open for me. So it's nice and even. So I'm going to uncheck the fills and check off borders. And maybe I'm going to do a 2-point border here. And I'm going to do stroke colors for each of these. I'll do a green. I'll do a yellow. And I'll do a blue. And just out of habit, I like to totally remove fills from whenever I do a stroke style. So you can see here, this is still attached to fill green. We don't want that. So you could either detach it from layer style, but we're just going to create a new style called stroke green. And I like to put the point value because that does become part of it. Stroke yellow 2 point. And then stroke blue 2 point. So now whenever we make something, like we're making a button or whatever, we can come into our layer styles and we have access to our different fill colors really quickly and our different stroke colors. So why do I have the colors in the layer styles and in the document? Well, that's because the way Sketch is organizing these things, if I want to be able to switch those colors around in a symbol, the easiest way for me to do that and be able to experiment or have a bunch of overrides is what they call them, is to do it with appearances, with layer styles. Now, if I just want to say, hey, I'm making a piece of text and I want it to be a particular color, well, that has to be done through colors. So there's kind of 2 ways that you're handling colors inside of a Sketch library. Now that I have my colors established, why don't I just reset them back to their fill state. Great. Now I'm going to just make a couple placeholder icons, and we will use those as our default icon set. So I'm going to just use my rectangle tool here and get my height to 32, my width to something like 4. Why don't we do, I'll Command D and duplicate. I'll rotate with Command Shift R, and then I'll drag. So we'll do a plus. We'll do a group and then rotate this group, and we have an X. And then I will take one of our pluses and duplicate it down. And we've got a menu. I don't think these are particularly stunning icons. I can change it here, ungroup them, and make sure that they do have a fill to them. And then if I wanted them to be a little friendlier, I guess I could give them some rounding. And now I have a little sort of menu, plus and minus icons. What I want to do is turn these all into symbols, and this is where we get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the word glyph in there. Because these are different glyphs, I'll do glyph underscore plus. I'm just going to copy this part and hit enter. Select my next one. Glyph underscore X. And this one will be glyph underscore menu. And then why don't, for good measure, we set up some buttons. So I'm going to make one button. It'll be a blue button. I'll make the width. It doesn't really matter what the width is. We'll do 120. And for the height, I'll do something like 36. Then I'll start typing. I'll do button label. And then maybe I'll start with one of my other layer styles like body. I'll drag that in and center it. But I'm going to do a couple extra things to get the button set up right. I'm going to make it a lot wider. I'm going to make it as wide as the button. And then I'm just going to take the width and I'm going to minus, say, 24 from it. So it's padded on each side. Center that. Now I'm going to center my text. So you notice the style is already broken. I'm also going to bold it. Okay. And since this is a new text style for me, why don't I go ahead and make a button style? And why don't we go super old school with it? I'm going to put on a shadow. I know a lot of you are going to be like, Ryan, should you have done that? I don't know. The answer is I don't know. Maybe like that. No, like that is fine. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to make a new style. And why don't we do 04 button label? Or if you think you're only going to have one kind of button, you can do button. And now I have design systems that are very large. So don't be afraid to, have a lot of styles in this thing. Just know that like your styles should be informed with each other. So I'm just making this as centered as I can. Maybe up an additional tick. And we'll say that I want my button to be just a little bit round, like my icons. So now I'm going to click and drag this whole thing. And I'm going to make that a symbol. And why don't we call it button? Let's go into my symbols page and get into some management here. So our glyphs are not the same size by default, so we want to do that. We want to make sure that they're all 32 by 32. And that means our menu is going to have to be centered, and our X is also going to be centered. And you might be saying, wow, Ryan, this X is so much smaller than this plus. Well, the X is really visually balanced as we saw on the main canvas. So X here isn't quite as, there we go. It has a much more centered X. So we're just dialing that in. You can take all these. If you want, you can throw them into a group or a grid rather and organize them. That wasn't perfect. Why don't we just do this? We can use our tidy commands and stuff and pull these in together. I like just to keep everything kind of nice and knolled, which is arranging things in 90-degree angles on my symbols palette. So let's put some of what we have done to the test. In fact, I'm going to do this one last detail before we do this. I'm going to take Command drag and select, see, 2 rectangles here. And I'm just going to use Booleans to combine these shapes so that they're one single shape. Okay. And I'm going to say, just call them glyph. And the reason why I'm doing some of this maintenance is because this is really going to help us with overrides later on. I want to call this background and just label is all this needs to be. So I'm going to go back to page 1. And now when I select my button, you can see here label tells me what it says now. I can override it here, or I can double click right in the canvas and you can see it kind of jumps, which is just a little weird rendering thing. And I can say call to action. It jumps right back in place. It maintains its style. You can see the button can be resized. If it gets too small, it will break. So you might want to establish a smaller button style if you need to go smaller. We have our icons. If we select one, we can say, now see, they are all 3 different sizes. I'm going to right click and say set to original size. There we go. Now we're nice and balanced. I'll tidy those up, bring them together, and I'll center align them. So whenever you make an adjustment to the symbol on the back end, you're probably going to need to revisit it on your canvas. And here you can see my glyph. Its style is overrideable, so I can say fill green, fill yellow. I could even say stroke if I, for some reason, wanted to do this. I don't think these look good on these particular icons, but there's definitely a use for that here. And then we have our text styles. Now, let's very quickly set this up as a library, and we'll see it in action. So what I'm going to do is save this sketch file. I'm going to go in a new folder here, and I'm going to name it Sketch Library Demo. My Demo Library. So this is my demo library. It's in Sketch, and it's all organized. Now what I'm going to do is hit Command N and create a new document. So I've got my new document window here. It's time to hook this library up, or that other demo library up, to Sketch. And what I'm going to do is hit Command, comma, or you can go into Preferences. It's the same thing. I'm going to select the Libraries panel in Preferences. And you can see some of my libraries kicking around. I'm going to add. And then I'm going to add the demo library. So it should be right where you left it. And it is here. So my demo library is connected. It shows you a little preview of the document. I'm going to just close this now. And now, whenever I'm typing, it's Helvetica, bold, 14 point, sure. But now, when I go to Appearance, I can say My Demo Library, and I can select options from it. So now I've got my size, I've got my bolding. I can do the same thing. I can say, this is my article. You should check it out. And then why don't we look at our old friend Jeffsome. And I'll just paste in a little bit of Jeffsome here. And now what you'll also see is if these 3 things, if any particular object was already in a library style, it will default this menu to choosing styles that are also in that section of the library. It's a little complicated, but it's safe to say that you don't necessarily have to go back and choose it from here. The options are kind of next to each other here, which is great. For my width, I'll just do 300. I haven't done an artboard yet here, so forgive me. I'm just going to hit A. And why don't we do Apple devices and an iPhone XS. And I'll drag these things right onto there. And I'll do a width of 327. Let's place a button. The button gets placed over here from the Symbols menu. My Demo Library. Button. Maybe we want to make the button a little bit wider and center it on the screen. Why don't we pretend this is a dialog, and I'm going to select this, My Demo Library, and a glyph, and say this is something that the user can close. Just like always, I can double click and say read more. Maybe it trails off. And then I can take all of these objects, select them all, tidy them, and say that they're all going to be some amount of space apart, 24. Then I can take these, and let's just drag them and center them. There we go. Snaps to the center. So now I'm noticing there's probably some changes I want to make. I'm not very happy with the line height of most of the stuff here. Well, let's go back to our original library and sort that out. So I'm going to swipe up and go over to my library, and I'm realizing, oh, I didn't really test these in multiple lines. So why don't I do that? Just going to add some additional characters here and shrink them down. And now I'm going to take my lines and I'm going to tighten up my headline. I'm going to tighten up my subhead. I'm actually going to go a little bit more generous here on my body copy. And maybe it looked a little bit big to me, so I'll take them down a little bit. Subheadline. You can come down as well. And all I have to do in the initial library is update the text style. Update. And I'll update this. And I'm going to make a mobile button as well. So I'm going to make a copy of this. And here's how I'm going to get essentially a brand new copy. I'm going to detach from symbol. I'm going to make a button that's 44 tall. And I'm going to make some text that's a little bit bigger. And why don't I take these and sort them out, align them. And now I'll create a new style. And maybe this is even 5. Button, mobile. And now I don't actually have to make a brand new symbol for that. Button mobile can sort itself out just through text styles. So I'm going to save this. It's important that you save. Then I'm going to swipe up on my Mac and come back here. And it's going to say a library update is available. It's going to show me, hey, you changed your headline, you changed your subhead, you've changed your body. Those are a little different now, and by a little different, we mean way different. I'll space them out by 32. This is my article. It's very good. You should check it out and read the whole thing. And then why don't we just get 2 paragraphs of Jeffsum in there. And our button, here's how we're going to transform it into the mobile button. I'm just going to make it taller, 48. And I'm going to go ahead and take the label that says read more and change it to be My Demo Library, button mobile. And so it's a nice bigger button now. And why don't I go ahead and just make this all a little bit more narrow? What do I want? 270. That's a little too narrow for me. How about 280? In fact, everything will be nice 280 and it'll be all locked up together. Tidy. Negative 36 seems a little bit crazy to me. Why don't we do 16? So aside from the fact that this is not very pretty with my strange line break here, tidy those again. Then I like to have a button be a little bit separate. But you can see, just like that, we've set up a library, and it's very easy to have a duplicate of this screen to say this, instead of our X, is going to be a menu. Instead of our blue, it's going to be green. This button, maybe it's warning us. I'll change the background over here to yellow. And now we have a little bit of a warning dialogue. So, maybe not so quick, but that is a look at setting up a library inside of Sketch, connecting it, and getting text styles, icons, buttons, and layer styles all in there. And you can see it's pretty easy to do, and you definitely can do it. And it's going to help you with your design projects, really take them to the next level as I sit here and tweak these positions like a madman to make sure everything is all aligned. But I hope you enjoyed this. Have a great day and keep designing.